Well, I think it's safe to say that something very strange is happening. Last week, FBI Director Kash Patel told a congressional hearing that, yes, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Senator Kennedy asked that question, and we were like, wait, what? I'm sorry, what? Okay, really? And then over the weekend, Dan Bongino, Deputy Director of the FBI, and Kash Patel in an interview with Maria Bartiromo, because, they're only apparently allowed to do like Fox News interviews. Apparently, that's like the only interviews you're allowed to do these days. They doubled down on this idea in a dual interview that Epstein did kill himself. Watch.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
I know it's hard work.
Now, Dan Bongino himself, successful Rumble show, had asked many valid questions when he was a host of his show, not representing the government. Those valid questions still persist, right? It's not an open and shut case. He himself encouraged us to ask these questions.
Right. He didn't have a cellmate. His cell block's guards fell asleep suddenly. His prison security cameras suddenly broke on the night of his murder. All of those things. Even friend of the show, my old friend Michael Bodden, who's one of the great medical examiners, said that it was clear to him that Epstein was murdered. Okay, I trust Michael Bodden's take on this. But anyway, so Dan Bongino and Kash Patel basically saying, hey, just trust us. We've seen the file. All right, let's bring in former FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, the host of a great show that you all need to check out, Kyle Seraphin Show. Great to see you, Kyle. Welcome to the show. Great to see you again.
Hello, Morrises. How you doing?
We're doing well. We're trying to sift through the garbage as usual. That's kind of like what our normal day looks like. So what was your take on this? I know you're not a sycophant, and you call BS when you see it. You're not, I'm a former FBI guy, so what these two guys just said in front of Maria Bartiromo, I'm taking it. They've seen the file. You know what? I'm done with this. What did you think when you saw this?
I heard we're not allowed to question the narrative now. We have to go with the Trust Me and Bro consulting firm that is out there pushing this information out. It's really troubling to me. There's two phrases with the word trust in it that I always have in my head. One of them is trust me, bro, which is sort of a joke that I'm not going to trust you. And then the second one is trust no one, because I grew up on the X-Files back when people thought that the FBI was going to be something cool. I actually have an X-Files poster on my wall because of that. So 16% of the American people actually believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. 16%. That is a very, very small minority of people. So if you're going to come at us with, I've seen the file, and by the way, I've seen other crime scenes, you're going to probably have to do a little bit better for most people, especially when you've been a vocal opponent of this sort of deep state cover-up and the fact that the FBI has not been transparent about a bunch of things. I heard very little in the way of facts. I heard a lot of filibuster in that interview. And there's three versions of Dan Bongino that I've experienced in my life. There's Dan Bongino on the podcast, which is pretty unfiltered, and it's just whatever Dan thinks of. Then there's Dan Bongino, who's FCC compliant, and he's on the radio, and he says mostly what he thinks of, but he cleans up his language. And then there's there's Fox News Dan Bongino. We saw Fox News Dan Bongino the other night. Fox News Dan Bongino reads off a teleprompter, and it feels like his genitals are being squeezed a little bit in a vice because it's not a very comfortable position for him to just go off a script. That's what that looked like for me. I've done a number of interviews. I used to work in the medical field. I've had people lie to me for a very long time. I've got kids. That didn't feel genuine. The sad thing is that you can say things that are technically true, and this is really the way the FBI loves to spin stuff. Technically true, but obviously disingenuous. Okay. And so Jim Comey would say things like that, and Chris Wray used to say things like that. And I get the impression that there are two ways that you could say that someone killed themselves. One of them would be that they, as we like to say, sua sponte, on their own volition, decided, I'm done with this world and I'm choosing the off-ramp. And so they made a conscious decision with no other outside influence to do so. And then there's another way you could say that somebody, quote unquote, killed themselves, and they actually decided that I've got a choice between ending it myself and somebody else dying a horrible death that I care about. We always act like Jeffrey Epstein didn't know other human beings. He had family members. His brother was actually responsible for his body after he was found dead. So was there a toxicology report? Was there a record of who came and spoke to him? Did he get a message? What did the prison comms look like? Obviously we don't have a lot of this information publicly available. Is that what convinced them that he technically did kill himself, but didn't actually really come up with the idea because the alternative was something really horrible? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more to it than just I've seen the file, and so you have to now believe me, especially when Dan went to that low voice of, I really hate saying it this way, and no one's going to believe. Like in the special operations world, they send everybody through SEER training. One of the things you can do during an interview is you can do different tactics to discredit your answer. So you can blink a lot, or you can blink not at all. You can shake your head no while you're saying things. You can look away and look like you're trying to find the answer somewhere else that looks obviously like you're under duress. And all of that interview looked uncomfortable and awkward. And no one is more sad than me to see it, because I really thought these guys were going to go in and do what we hoped, which was give us transparency and clean something up.
Well, the part that gets me is he says, I've seen the files. Now, when they were asked, why don't we know more about the assassination attempts on President Trump? And they said, well, there's active litigation, which is fair. The government cannot impugn a defendant while they're trying to defend themselves in a court of law. Mm-hmm. But is there active litigation around Epstein so I've seen the files, but you can't? What?
Right.
Okay. Why can't we see the files? Is there any legitimate reason that only they get to see it?
I mean, I heard that the files were on Pam Bondi's desk and we were going to see them. I don't remember how many weeks ago that was, but it wasn't very recently. So, we're also going to hear the truth about January 6th if you just wait another week. This feels very much like we're going to keep stringing you along with, to be continued stuff like when I was a kid and you had to wait every week to find out what the new episode was going to be. And I don't like it, because we're in an era of instant gratification. And we've also had people tell us that they were going to give us the truth. I know. That's what he said.
Let me just put this little aside, because they said we can't do anything about January 6th because we're past the statute of limitations. So we kind of we wash our hands of this. We wish we were in there, but we didn't. So that's that. So is that the case closed?
I mean, that is legitimate, though. I mean, they've got a federal statute of limitations, 5 years. Are they going to waste FBI resources doing something that they can't prosecute?
No, what they could do is they could get rid of the people that were involved in it that are still there. And one of them, Steve Jensen, was someone they defended at the end of that interview, which made me sick to my stomach, because what they said was factually inaccurate. They said that in order to find out what happened on January 6th, they needed three things. Dan Bongino, direct quote: we need people, we need information, we need people with information. First of all, that's two things. Let's be really real serious about that. And more importantly, you don't need to promote people into places in order to get information from them when they work for the federal government. You can compel an interview. Steve Jensen is 1 year away from being able to be eligible for a retirement pension. So I think he has a lot of a vested interest, because he's not fully vested in that pension, to cooperate. If they said, come and speak the truth, you're going to get either what's called a Garrity or a Calkins warning. Those are the two tactics. They're kind of like a variation on Miranda when you work inside the federal government. One means that you're not going to be criminally liable, but we could take your job. And the other one's you're going to be fine, but we want all the information and we're going to keep you safe from it. End of the day, they can compel him to speak. And the FBI has various methods in order to do that administratively. They bring you in on various different security investigations. And so he could lose his pension over it, or they could promote him to a spot so he's in charge of the pipe bomber investigation and claim that was the reason. I have it on pretty good authority from people inside the Bureau. They promoted him, didn't realize what they were stepping into, and then they've been doing CYA ever since. They've actually changed the policy about the FBI releasing press releases about who they promoted to these senior positions, because all the people that are in management have dirt on them at this point. They all have something dirty, and there probably are some decent human beings mixed in the bag there as well. At the end of the day, you should throw them all out, because none of them said no to the COVID vaccines when they went out there. They didn't protect their people. They allowed people like me to get thrown out over it. None of them were aggressive whistleblowers that went forward when some of us went to Congress. And if they haven't done that, they should be gone. I think that's what we voted for. I thought that's what we were hearing these guys were going to go do, and then they haven't done it. So for me, this is like a massive letdown. It's so disappointing.
But trust me, bro. Because
trust me, and bro consulting.
I mean,
and
remember
hold on,
memes?
in a week,
we put you in cool sunglasses. We have faith in you.
Yeah, we had all the music of you walking in there like a gangster, Kash Patel.
Club.
But I want to get to something that they did say during this interview was, just wait. In a week, Just give us about a week, because we've got some bombshell stuff that we're about to drop that we discovered. So just wait. And Maria kind of pressed him on it and said, yep, it's coming. It's coming. Do you buy that anymore?
No, because I watched the interview that Kash Patel did with Trey Gowdy. He was 30 days into his term, and he walked in and said, I wanted to get, some time to get things together. And let me just tell you, we're going to work on chain of command and leadership structure. And we're going to fix the problem in DC because there's 11,000 FBI employees here. So we're going to send 1,500 of them out into the field to mess up what they're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, he talked about it being a third of the FBI's workforce or close to it. It's now going to be a quarter of the FBI's workforce still is in the DC area, whether it be Baltimore or Washington Field or headquarters proper. Like, the things they are saying don't make sense when you've worked there. And the answer has always been the thing that Dan Bongino, look, I just go back to what Dan Bongino said about the FBI. First of all, he said that in 2018, it was like kind of the good men and women, and there's a couple of people at the top that are ruining it for everybody. And then we saw through 2020 and 2021, by 2022, he was out there saying it needs to be dismantled, that it's not redeemable. It's an irredeemable organization. And by the way, I've been saying that if there was ever a chance to do it, you had to get rid of the rot. And that means the people that are at the GS-15, that's your secondary supervisor level, and then everybody in senior management, all the SESers, because all of them said yes when they should have said no. Or they should have said, hold on a minute, is this even constitutional? Why are we in such a rush to push into these policies from the previous administration? Why are we running after trespassers with everything we've got? Are there not more pressing needs? Because there really are. We find it every day. The FBI doesn't catch legitimate terrorists. They actually set up terrorists. I was in a movie with Dan Bongino that was about that. It was called The Police State, and it was done with Dinesh D'Souza. The entire premise is that the FBI sets people up, and they've been doing it for 20 plus years. And by the way, everybody who thinks it's like, oh, they were just going after right-wingers, I want people to open their minds. I'm an independent conservative person. And when you look at what the evidence shows, the FBI just goes wherever its next paycheck is, wherever the next pot of congressional money is. And so in the early 2000s, they were going after Muslims in mosques because that was hot, because after 9/11, that's what we did. And then they sort of ran out of that. Then they went after this thing called HVEs. And I know we've talked about it before, but they found people that were in the United States that found foreign ideology. So they went after those people. And they ran out of that, but they were already looking in the country. So they found like white supremacists and militia violent extremists, maybe guys who might have like a hatchet on the wall or a bayonet from World War II, or they might have like a don't tread on me flag, God forbid, or a Betsy Ross flag like I have over my shoulder. Like, all of these things then became the symbol of militia violent extremists and anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists. Read that, MAGA people. It's not about an ideology that they were like owned by the left. They're owned by whoever pays them. The FBI goes after the dollar amount that Congress puts out there. And if you're going to say that there actually is a uniparty and that there is just one thing that operates in Washington, D.C. and pushes policy out, then you have to believe that it's going after both sides when it needs to, because it doesn't really care about you and it doesn't care about me. It certainly doesn't care about American liberties. The FBI has proved it over and over again. And I thought the guys that went in there knew that because they said it for 10 years. They made millions. Both of them did. I mean, Kash is a multimillionaire. Dan Bongino is a multimillionaire. We have two multimillionaires that are in there that shouldn't be buyable. And we thought they were going in there with the same principles that we all were hearing. And instead of like what we see with Pete Hegseth, where he's like closest to what the warfighter needs, the right answer in the FBI was always to take brick agents, whether we call GS-13s, take the first line supervisors, the supervisory special agents, the GS-14s, and make them in charge of the FBI because they're closest to the mission. And instead, you're getting a bunch of supervisors and headquarter people that have been doing programmatic management and Kinsey consulting sort of schemes to be able to keep bonuses. And they're the ones who are advising these guys. Like, I guarantee you this, I still know more trustworthy people in the FBI than Dan and Kash combined at this point. And I haven't been there in a couple years. That's not a good situation. Wow. They don't have a local roadmap. They don't have a tour guide to show them who's untrustworthy. And they should assume everybody's untrustworthy. And I think they've chosen the opposite.
What is the biggest threat in the United States right now? And is it in alignment with what Kash has said publicly in his mission at the FBI? What do you think the biggest threat to Americans is right now?
I think it depends on what you actually think the FBI is and should do. If you want to go after a proactive threat, there's a massive argument to be made that international terrorism is still the biggest threat because you need a very complex, sophisticated sort of intel gathering capability to go after it. And by the way, we imported 100,000 Afghans plus however, God knows how many millions of people came in over the southern border that we don't have any idea who they are. So that's a real problem. They brought in people and material and they brought in plans. I've talked to people like Sarah Adams. I've talked to other intel analysts that think that that's a real probability possibility that there are independent cells around the United States that are just waiting for the best opportunity for them to be able to have a multimodal, multi-location strike in the United States that would make everything else we've seen, sort of pale in comparison. If they can get their ducks in a row, that would be devastating. But I'm not really big and keen on the FBI doing pre-crime because that's what that involves. So, you could make the argument that violent crime is really a big deal. The problem is that the FBI doesn't have a primary investigative role in violent crime. The FBI's only job there is law enforcement assist for local PDs. And there's a good argument to be made for that if that's what you want to do. But that means dismantling a huge chunk of what the FBI is and does, primarily the intel bracket. And I'd be fine with that if that's what we said. If we said we want the FBI to go after violent crime and interstate crime. Kash Patel said he was going to sort of like deprioritize white collar crime. Who else goes after federal level frauds with millions of dollars at stake? There's really nobody that's going to go do that. We already have an organization that goes after drugs, the DEA. We already have another organization that does the same thing in the ATF, even though they infringe on our civil liberties because they go after guns too, but they mostly go after drugs and guns combined. So why is the FBI going to go after it? They said child sex trafficking was a big deal. Have they promoted that to the number one banded threat in the United States? The FBI actually prioritizes threats based on what are called band levels at a national level and at a local level. And if they haven't made child sex trafficking and human trafficking in general like one of the top 3 threats in the country, then that's all lip service. And I haven't heard them use the words, so I don't know that they have. And people who know what to listen for have been listening for it. And the people who are asking those questions aren't getting those answers either. So if they did, great. I think it's a moral evil. So you can do that. But, however you decide, there's always going to be a political aspect to how the FBI does business, because just like every prosecution at the state or the local level, whatever you focus on is what you consider to be the biggest priority. And that says a lot about what you value, right? So if that's what Trump thinks is the most important thing, he could do that. You can make arguments in many different facets. I'm not mad about them saying that they want to go after and help violent crime stop, because that would actually make a difference. I just don't think 14,000 agents, of which maybe 10,000 are investigators. I'm not sure 10,000 investigators across the country are going to change the needle for most Americans in most cities. I just don't, because, there's a million cops out there in uniform across this country. That's where the money ought to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess it's inexplicable. The headlines this morning that really teed me off is the spiral of silence, is that the media refused to report on these inconsistencies in Epstein's death. And now the media is reporting that the head of the FBI is saying, see, there was never anything to see here, open and shut case. And so these MAGA conspiracies are unfounded, and that's the end of it. And never get answers to why was his roommate moved the day before? Why were the guards not checking on him and falsified the logs? Why did the cameras go out? These are blaring questions, and the media's victory lapping, and that makes me mad. So.
Let me add 2 points to that. Number one, They said that they've seen the file. Why are we supposed to believe that what's in the file is honest, was done accurate, without some sort of nefarious intent? You could exhume the body. The body is actually interned in Palm Beach, Florida. So that's actually a thing that could be done. Do we have the toxicology? Is there another way to run those things? Those seem relevant. Did somebody get sedated before a strangulation or something? Because that could be really interesting. So exhuming of the body is one possibility. But why do we have to trust the file? That would be the first sort of thing you'd question. If you wanted to start from square one, you'd do that. And the second thing is, and this is maybe more of a meta-analysis, but I have this belief that only the enemy can tell you where you are weak and where they are strong. And so I keep telling this to people. If you want to see who's really problematic to folks that are on the hard left and expect us to go the other direction than what I think is right for this country, see who they're complaining about. Because they're not complaining about Dan Bongino and Kash Patel right now. They're not. I watch it every single day. I read almost exclusively left-leaning sources because it goes against what my confirmation bias is. And I don't see them crying about what these guys are up to. In fact, I had people inside the Hoover building tell me that when Kash Patel was sworn in, people packed their stuff into bankers' boxes and they planned on moving out. And the first day when they actually took the stuff from their cars and left them in their desks was on February 23rd, when he went against Elon Musk's request by Doge to give everybody 5 things that they accomplished in the week. And he told the FBI, don't worry about that. Like, you're exempted from this mandate government wide. That was the first time when he stepped out of step with what we thought the agenda was. And then the second time when everybody unpacked their boxes and said, I got it, I'm safe, was when they promoted Steve Genshin. And that happened the last month of March. So if people don't know that the folks that we think are problematic inside the FBI, they now think that they're safe. And, like I said, the enemy always tells you the thing you need to know about yourself, and the media has been doing it as well. So those are the 2 things I want to leave you with.
So I'll get you out of here on this, Kyle. That's fascinating. I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Who are they attacking the most then? Is it Tom Holman? Is it ICE agents? I mean, is that the focus from the left?
And Hegseth as well, I think as well. So I think if you go, and there's obviously a lot of money behind DOD, there seems to be a concerted effort to continue to push on that. They are seriously pushing on things like immigration. They think they can win on that, on the sort of heartstrings issues. So you see where they are most upset. And I see constant outrage about these things. What I don't see is people talking about the fact that when the FBI was asked for all the names of agents who worked on January 6th, and there was something like 5,000 names, if you guys recall back, this was in February, I want to say.
Yeah.
In February, DOJ queried the FBI. The FBI resisted. We had the acting director at the time, Brian Bristol, say, we're not going to give it to you. And then there's ongoing litigation right now, and it's being done representing the FBI's employees in the name of the FBI Agents Association. So it's kind of like a professional union, if you will. They're not really a union because they don't have like collective bargaining, but they do sort of take dues every month, and you can deduct it from your paycheck, and they directly are able to sort of finance, shared legal defense. The FBI Agents Association hired Norm Eisen and Mark Zaid to represent them. If that tells people anything, Norm Eisen was involved in the first Trump impeachment. Who are like, and Mark Zaid is hard left. So you took people that are on the opposite, like that are like the part of the resistance, anti-Trump TDS to the max, and you had them represent the FBI agents against the interest of the DOJ per Donald Trump's orders. This should tell you everything you need to know about that, like the average quote unquote rank and file that's in there. This is not like a shallow problem that management can fix. And if people don't realize that, you don't realize how deep this problem is. The FBI Agents Association is a hard left Marxist style organization. They promote DEI and equality and all the worst buzzwords you can think of. And they've been doing it for years. I actually opted out of it when they went after Americans' privacy. They went after and they said, we think that the FBI director, going back to Comey, that the Going Dark initiative needs a lot more attention, and we need to have lawful access to things like Signal and your end-to-end encrypted apps. And I stopped giving them money because I said, I'm an American first, and one day I won't be an FBI agent. And I don't want you guys to be able to hack my phones because you have a backdoor to all the end-to-end encrypted apps. We don't destroy technology just because some people abuse it. Work harder. And I got an hour of pushback from the president of that FBI Agents Association. There's a new one now. She's a woman. She gets interviews on CNN and MSNBC. That should tell you a lot as well. I never see her on Fox. There's a real problem within this agency, and it is not recaptured. And right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be.
Okay. Kyle Seraphin from the Kyle Seraphin show. Thank you so much for that context. It really does shine some light on us with like, why do we not get these answers? And you have questions to further that. Yeah,
No, I'm paying attention to every word. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating, Kyle, as always. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me back on, y'all.